talking about building hot rods here. We're not talking about sugarcoating. We're talking about everything. Knuckle busting. The rust in your fucking eyes. We're talking about building fucking hot rods. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of It's All About the Build podcast. You're dealing with Elliot today and Randy, and today is number 4 on the episode list, and we're diving into your guys' first build. This episode is going to be directed at the very early time of building hot rods. We're talking to the guy who wants to build hot rods, has been on the old interweb looking to build a hot rod, been doing research on building hot rods, and wants to buy a hot rod. And by hot rod, I mean, whether it's a restoration or it's going to be custom or whatever, that's the type of person we're gearing this towards right now. We are going to be diving into that first purchase and things that you need to be thinking about before you even finalize or go look at a car. I know when I bought my first vehicle to restore, I stared at the old Craigslist forever.
I do that at least twice a day.
Yeah.
2 or 3 times a day.
Yeah, I have no, I'm not planning on buying anything anytime soon. But I do too. And it's always like, man, I would buy that right now.
Doesn't hurt to look.
No, fuck no. But what we're doing is we're going to be looking at that. We want to give you guys some sort of direction or guidance here to kind of put some shit into perspective and to give you guys something to look for, what to steer clear of. We're going to give you some tips along the way, and whatever else we get into is going to be beneficial, I guarantee it. Because a basket case is not what you want. And we're going to get into basket cases. But the first topic we want to talk about here, it starts with you. Just like everything else in this world, it starts with you. And you got to really look deep down inside. You got to look in the mirror, Randy. And you got to figure out.
I'm looking.
What are you good at?
What am I good at?
What can you fucking weld? Like, do you know what a fucking carburetor is? Do you know how a carburetor works?
Is that like the bubbles in like soda?
Kind of.
Carburation?
Yes. It's like if you take the back off of your toilet and you push the button and water goes out, water comes in. That is a generic as it gets carburetor system.
Yeah.
So if you can grasp what's happening there, you're halfway to fucking carburation.
If you don't know what a carburetor is, just go to your toilet.
Yeah, pop the back. Push the button. Push down on the fucking little handle. And just think of it as fuel. Just think of it as like when your turds go down the tube, that's your combustion chamber.
I never would have made that connection.
But seriously, though. So we didn't have a carburetor class in college, but my teacher, bless his heart, he ended up having a class after class about carburetors.
That's cool.
And the very first thing he said, if you don't get any, he said the easiest way I can describe a carburetor is pop the back of your shitter.
Wow.
And I was like, really? Huh. And from that day forward, it fucking makes perfect sense. Anyways, moving on. You need to look deep down inside of yourself and figure out exactly what you know and what you don't know. What are your skill sets? Like I asked Randy, can you weld? You know what a carburetor is? You know how to set gear lash? Can you read a fucking roller? A tape measure?
Can you Google?
Yeah, can you Google? Because that is a huge, huge question right there. If you don't know how to Google, it's going to take you a little bit longer than everybody else.
Yeah.
But that's number one, is figuring out what your skill sets are. Because the last thing you want to do is dive into a project and you have no fucking idea what you're getting into. Because the worst feeling ever, like when I first started doing this, Randy, I'm sure you can relate, but the first time I looked at a project in somebody's garage, it was overwhelming because I looked at everything.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean. And that's like looking at anything, like any kind of project you run into, you're like building a deck.
Yeah.
You know, just like something like that.
You see a stack of wood over there. It's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
I got myself into.
Even building a model car.
Uh-huh.
A little model car.
Yeah.
That can be overwhelming sometimes. If you can get past that, you're on your way.
Yeah, because I know even now, sometimes whenever I look at a vehicle and it's like, okay, we got this much money to play with. What all do we have to do? We got this, and this. And then we make a list of shit. And we got 4 pages of shit that we got to do or purchase.
Not including the shit you forgot.
Yeah, not including the shit you forgot or you need to buy later. It's overwhelming. And the number one thing is to don't get overwhelmed with it. Like literally, it's an elephant. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I don't know how you get through the bone, but whatever. That's number one. Be honest with yourself. Figure out exactly what the fuck you're dealing with, as far as your skill set. Because if your ego gets in the way at any point in time with a build, then it's gonna be sitting in the garage.
Especially if it's your first one. Like,
that's all there is to it.
take it easy.
Yeah. You got to be humble in this situation. Even now, like we've been building cars and doing this shit for a while, and even now, if you let your ego get in the way, then you're gonna have fucking problems.
Yeah, I never had that mentality. Even when I figured something out and I did it again and did it again, you know, there's always a better way of figuring it out, or, you know, stay humble.
Yeah. And that whole ego bullshit goes right into what else we want to talk about here, and that's seek quality guidance. Just because somebody knows a little bit more than you, then learn from him. And if it looks like he doesn't know what he's doing, there could be a possibility he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing.
Eventually, you'll figure that out.
Yeah. But if somebody knows a little bit more than you, I mean, just pay attention. Take it with a grain of salt, but pay attention. When I had my tuner car back in the day, before I even got into hot rod building and shit like that, you know, there was other people that always knew more than me. Well, there's fucking 100 million people that know more than me already, you know, still. But if somebody knew a little bit more than I did, then I fucking would question until basically I couldn't answer my questions anymore, just so I could figure that shit out. And that also goes back to Google. You can get on a lot of jalopy fucking web pages and get a lot of information off of that, but that's like with anything, you know, if you got a sore throat and you Google that shit, next thing you know, you got, you know, the COVID, and you got the start of some sort of acid reflux disease that's going to cause some sort of stomach problems and all that horse shit. So some of the best guidance you can get is just calling somebody. Like, we get phone calls all the time where people call us and they fucking are asking questions, which is totally fine with me. If I can help you over the phone, I would rather help you over the phone than come help you out at the house. And it's free.
Yeah.
And it's free. But seeking quality guidance is a big thing. And just make sure that if the ego's in the way, then there's no way in hell you're going to ever ask for fucking questions. And as far as quality guidance goes, you know, if you have a part or something that you have that you're trying to get into and put on or whatever, you know who the best person to call is? Whoever the fuck built that part for it. That little sticker on the side of it that says where it came from, that's who you want to call.
I know it's a pain in the ass too, but just take 10 minutes and do it.
Yeah.
It's going to save you 3 hours down the road.
Yeah. If you're lucky, only 3 hours. But these small little like this small little area here is probably the most important part because, like I said, if you don't know how to do something, then you're screwed.
Or you can really fuck it up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can really fuck shit up, especially if you're doing some sort of structural welding or anything of that nature. Or you don't know how to put the fucking engine together properly. You know,
I mean, you can do that. I mean, that's a huge learning experience. You know, it's just putting an engine together. Yeah, I mean, you can do that. You know, do it the best of your abilities, but when it throws a rod and you know 50 miles,
yeah.
You take it apart and figure out what you did wrong.
Right.
You could do it that way.
Yeah, but as long as back to quality guidance. If you got the owner's fucking manual, if you got the book for how to rebuild this small block Chevy, then you know that there was something drastically wrong, or you did something completely wrong or whatever. But if you're just fucking winging it, you're never going to know what the hell happened. And if your ego's in the way, then it definitely wasn't your fault.
Right.
But building hot rods, that's going to tell you real quick whose fucking fault it is. There ain't no covering up whatever you just screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you did it. It don't run because whatever you just did. And if you're trying to work somewhere and the boss is pissed off about it, you know, tell him to go fuck himself and go find a new job. No, I'm joking. Just fix the son of a bitch.
Yeah, make it right.
It's simple. At the end of the day, this stuff isn't difficult. And the more humble you are with yourself and the more honest you are with yourself, the easier time it's going to be, because there's literally no such thing as a dumb question. And if the person looks at you and says that's a dumb question, then that's the wrong fucking person to be asking him a question. Because I've worked for a lot of people and I've asked them questions and they look at you like, you don't know that, or some sort of response in that nature. And it's like, why am I asking that question? Maybe I'm asking you because I'm curious about why you did it that way or whatever, which that's a whole other fucking podcast. Douchebag alert. So what's the next topic we're getting into here, Randy?
And when you know what you're good at, then you know what you can work on. So picking the project that you know that you can do
best suits your ability.
Yeah, best suits your ability. And even if it doesn't, as like we said, as long as you're willing to talk to the people to, edge yourself in the right direction.
And you always want to talk to somebody that actually works on cars. Just because the fucking guy owned 15 of them don't mean shit. If the guy, you can be around a whole herd of people that are riding in the same car as you, and when I mean same car, I mean the same brand and the whole 9 yards, but the one thing they all have in common is they got somebody else to work on it. They still don't have a fucking clue what they're doing. So don't call me and ask me questions and I tell you what the fuck I think, just to turn around and talk to some ass clown who's been around, don't work on him. He just, paid somebody $20 to work on it because he's a cheap bastard, just to not listen to what I told you to do and then turn around and tell me that what I told you to do was right, but you listen to some cheap bastard. That's what I'm talking about. Rant over. Moving forward.
So, yes. When picking your project, you have to look at a few things. That was a good rant.
Thank you.
Yeah. When picking your project, you have to look at a few things like, was it running or driving? In recent years at least. Is it a basket case? Is there a lot of rust? Is there a lot of missing parts?
Is the chrome missing?
The chrome missing. Is the dash pieces missing? The knobs, the bits and pieces, anything that you can think of to finish the car or truck.
Yeah, if you're trying to keep this like a restoration project where you want it to be all original, and turns out you don't have the knobs, you got to remember that each knob's $25 fucking dollars. If you're lucky. And if you don't know how to Google, then a project where everybody's looking for that barn find, and that barn find 9 times out of 10 is that rare car. And that rare car in this industry, rare also means, Randy, can you take a guess?
Cheap?
Yes, Randy. No, the
Just
complete
kidding.
opposite.
Yeah, no. It
Expensive.
means expensive.
Fucking expensive. So that's yes, you found the one owner, one of 10 fucking cars on the planet.
1 of 10. Wow, that's pretty rare.
But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You're looking at some serious shit. Or you're looking at the Imperial line. Let's say it's the high-end line of vehicles, and that was the highest end in the 50s, and they only made 1,500 of the fucking car, and it's got everything in it but the record player.
And just because you come across this for a decent price doesn't mean you pull the trigger.
Yeah, it could be a decent price because everybody doesn't want to tackle it. But whenever you find that gem of rarity, if you have no idea where to find the parts that are going to need to be replaced, or you don't want to put the money into the fact that radio needs to work, or that AC, that defrost system, that rare defrost system, or that rare heater from the early 30s shit, late 30s shit needs to work, you got to be prepared to send it down to California and pay them $5,000 to make a fucking defrost or a heater work on the floor.
That's a lot of money for heat.
Yeah, it's junk.
Then you should be thinking about what is your goal with this project of yours?
What's your fucking budget?
What's your budget and what's your goal?
Yeah.
What are you trying to get out of this?
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, if in my opinion, which I like to give that a lot.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So In my opinion, if it's your first vehicle and you want to basically learn how something works and be as basic as possible, like possibly a mid-20s vehicle, like a Model T, could possibly be the greatest project.
And you can still find this pretty cheap.
Dirt cheap.
Especially fiberglass ones.
Yeah. Well, hell, Model Ts, you can still find metal shit, because Model A's is when you start finding fiberglass shit, but the Model T's?
Yeah, I mean, if it was a fiberglass, I mean, obviously it's aftermarket, but sometimes you can find those cheap projects like that, and there's not gonna be much to them, but you can put it together however you want.
Yeah.
That's probably the best entry level hot rod that you can get into is a Model T.
Yeah, because literally it was just made to run. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
You will learn about all sorts of shit with that, because the carburetor's about as generic as the fucking back end of a shitter, like we talked about. And you have no choice but to learn about what advance is, what retarding the engine is, all that stuff, because that's how you drive the damn thing. But it's so fucking basic. A lot of them have like a tail light and a headlight.
Yeah.
And all they do is just work. So, I mean, something in the early early years, 20s and 30s, could possibly be a really good starting project, just because it forces you to learn at a basic, before you start putting in accelerator pumps and you start dicking with jets and the whole 9 yards as far as carburetors go.
You could literally find a carburetor off Facebook Marketplace and just tear it apart and rebuild it, and probably the best way to learn about those.
Yeah, Mike's Carburetor. There's a shitload of videos online about Mike's Carburetors. It's a carburetor shop that sells all sorts of stuff. I've actually talked to them countless times about some of this old shit that I've gotten into over the years.
And if you're thinking, well, carburetors are out of date and no one uses those anymore, I mean, don't read into the hype on the internet about fuel injection nowadays. Carburetors is still relevant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people, the LS swaps and the Coyote swaps. I mean, it is extremely efficient, and the power's there, and blah, blah, blah.
I mean, because you see these guys, they put fuel injection systems on, small block Chevys or, whatever they have sitting in their garage. But think about what you're trying to get out of it. Like I said, what's your goal? If you're only trying to drive this thing maybe a couple thousand miles in a year, carburetor's way to go, because you're not driving it in the winter. You're not driving it in, as long as you're not in a 6,000 feet elevation, whatever, carburetor's just going to be fine.
Yeah.
For what you're trying to do.
Well, not only that, I mean, yeah, you can slap a sniper or something on top and turn it into fuel injection, electronic fuel injection.
But
EFI.
That's going to eat into your budget.
Yeah. But not only that, you got to wire that thing up.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, do you know what the hell you're doing? And like Randy said, a lot of these EFI systems are self-learning, which is all fine and dandy, but if you don't drive it enough, it's never going to learn. There's certain steps that you have to take and drive the damn thing just so it learns it properly. And then, depending on how you do it, you got to, do you know how to tell how many points is on your ignition module inside your fucking distributor to make sure you hook up your EFI system properly? Because if you don't, guess what? It ain't going to fucking work right. And I've worked in shops where I had just started, and this old man comes in, and he's like, I got talked into this thing, and it just don't run right. And it's like, okay. It was handed to me, and they're like, this thing isn't running right. Figure out what the problem is. And I went up to the boss, the man behind, the man with his name on the side of the building. And I said, how many points does this ignition module have? And he said, well, how many prongs are coming out of the side of the distributor? Well, every distributor has five little prongs coming out that you plug into on an HEI, a high efficiency ignition, whatever the fuck it is. Anyways, he told me it was whatever the hell, however many prongs it was. Well, you don't fucking find out that way. So immediately I went to the ignition module, and it turns out it's a different number. It was like 3 or fucking 6 or fucking 27,000. Who gives a shit what it was? It was incorrect.
So they didn't have the right distributor.
So you wire those in completely different depending on how many points they have. Like completely different routing, completely different wires plug into different wires, and that's what the problem was. So if you don't know about the wiring, or if you're shitty with wiring and you're just throwing shit on because you decided to listened to Jim Bob Jacobs down the road who said to put this on there, and you were like, okay, but now you're screwed because you didn't know how to fucking wire properly. You don't know how to take these proper steps, or you don't read directions for shit.
Yeah, and if you buy something used or something like that off Facebook Marketplace, and they don't, I mean, sometimes they don't come with instructions. So I mean, you just have to do your research and figure out what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Going back to the fuel injection thing, like if you buy a used throttle body off of Facebook or eBay or whatever, and if it's used, and sometimes it might not come with all the parts, you have to really research and figure out, well, what does it take to run a throttle body on a small block Chevy. You can sometimes get away with using the original gas tank, but you have to make some modifications. You have to add a return line, and you have to make sure the return line is the right size, and you have to make sure that you run the right fuel pump for a fuel injection system. So
yeah, talking about fuel pumps, do you know that there's two different types of fuel pumps, one for diesel, one for gas?
I don't mess with diesels, so I didn't really
Okay,
know that.
well, in case you decide to put a fucking diesel engine into anything, and you run down the road because you need a new fuel pump, and you just grab one off the shelf, that fucker ain't gonna work, because there's diesel ones and there's gas ones. And they run off of two different pressure settings and shit like that, and you're gonna it'll just shut the truck down. You'll be driving down a fucking road and it'll just shut down. And you'll scratch your ass wondering what the hell the problem is. And you'll end up either just parking it and calling it a piece of shit, or you'll call somebody and you'll be like, hey, you got the wrong fucking pump in here. Speaking of fuel pumps.
Well, shit.
Yeah.
Oh, and here's another thing. When picking your project, kind of like switching topic here, but when you're picking your project, depending on what state you live in, you might want to look into whether or not your car needs a title or a registration of some sort. So, that's going to lean into like checking the VIN, and, does it have a VIN plate or anything like that?
Do they match?
And do they match? Yes.
Does it match what's supposed to be there? Because just because everything matches, you still might be working with some shady shit. But that's for another conversation.
Back in the day, they would take VIN plates off different cars and put them on car they're working on.
Back in the day, hell.
Well, probably even now.
Oh yeah.
Nowadays.
Even nowadays they do. It's ridiculous. Back to after we went on that rant about fucking fuel injections. What we're trying to talk about here is what you should be looking for before you dive into this purchase. And if it's a rust bucket, if it's got a bunch of rust, then you're pretty much screwed. The last thing you really want to do is buy a car or a truck that's in primer, because if I was a betting man, I would say that thing's got a bunch of mud on it, and they just slap primer on it after they put a 1/4 inch thick of mud around the fact that they dented the shit out of it.
You don't see too many people actually doing metal work.
Yeah. But why would you put it in primer and then never paint it?
Well, maybe they didn't get to that point yet. I don't know.
If you're in primer, I mean, you're heading down the home stretch.
Here's a little tip. If you're going to look at a classic car and it's in primer, or maybe even paint, whatever, bring a magnet with you.
Oh, yeah.
Bring a magnet.
Yeah, the old magnet tricks, and just fucking start sticking it to it.
Yeah, just whack it.
Yeah, no, but you gotta. Okay, so you'd be surprised. I mean, if it's in the weeds and you can't even get under it, you gotta just think about what the hell you're dealing with. Ask the guy to drag it out of wherever the hell it's at so you can look at it first. Or at that point in time, you might just be like, I'm just gonna get it. But when it comes to rust and damage and repairs like that, you got to think about what you're working with. If you're working with a vehicle that is, for example, we have 3 vehicles in the shop right now. 2 of them are pretty much the exact same thing. We got a 67 and a 68 Chevy C10 pickup truck, both short beds. And then we have a 65 Buick Riviera. And they do not make replacement panels for 1965 Buick Riviera. Some places sell some pretty generic stuff, and it's almost better to just make shit on your own. But for the majority of panels and parts on this car, as far as rust repair goes, you're pretty much 98% of it has to be built by hand. Now, the 2 C10s that we have in the shop, you can literally buy that whole vehicle out of a catalog.
Even the cab.
You can buy the whole cab. Probably what, 10 grand? It can be delivered right to your front door.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Like we literally, this build that we're doing right now, all it had was the cab. So we have purchased almost every panel for that truck. The bed panels, the bed sides, the front of the bed. I'm going to get a tailgate, the 2 front fenders, the grill,
The doors.
the doors.
You can buy the floors.
I got cab corners, rockers, outer rockers, inner rockers are about a fucking joke. The lower part of the A-pillar.
Now, keep in mind those types of pieces you can buy out of a catalog. They're not always OEM spec. Sometimes their stamping process is a little different or whatever, but sometimes they don't really fit the same as they did back in the day. So keep that in mind if you do look into that.
Yeah, because basically this C10 project that we have, we got all these new panels, but every single panel we gotta fuck with, putting it lightly. Like literally, they don't fit. And even though they all come out from the same store, the left front fender has a different
shape to it.
Yeah, different shape to it than the right. And the back side of the driver's side of the bed is a little bit different than the passenger side of the bed, and everything in between.
So real quick, if we're talking about actually buying these parts out of a catalog and putting them on your vehicle, no matter if it's a C10 or Mustang or Camaro or whatever, your goal is going to depend on whether or not you're going to have to cut up these pieces that you buy, brand new sheet metal that comes from a store.
It's supposed to fit.
Supposed to fit, but when you put all this stuff together, it actually, if you know what you're looking for, it's really not the fit and finish that really should be. So if you're willing to do the work, you can make those pieces fit really nice. It's just going to be a little bit more work.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, you can buy a front fender and put it on. And the alignments, flip a fucking coin if it's going to line up half decent.
And that's okay if that's what you want.
Yeah. I mean, it's all in the end goal. But if you're listening to this podcast, your end goal should be quality work. Quality craftsmanship. And take the extra 5 minutes to figure it out, man. And that's another part of the topic. I mean, that goes into our next topic, but we'll touch on that here in a minute. But this picking out the car that you want is by far relies on what you're willing to do and what your skill set is.
And what's available out there.
Like if your skill set isn't that good, maybe your best bet right now is to buy something that's running and driving and half decent to begin with.
And if it's not running and driving, make sure the engine at least turns over and you can get it to run with little to no effort.
Yeah. And if you don't know how to turn an engine over, just Google it. And
then there's different levels of that too. Like, sometimes you find a car in a field and if there's not much moisture in the area and you can kind of go up to it and just kind of tug on a crank pulley and it starts to turn over and then, you're all right. But if a car's been sitting for a while and, it looks pretty solid, you might have to do a few extra things like pouring oil down the cylinder walls, or there's actually a couple of different solutions you can buy for that you can actually pour down using transmission fluid works well for that. But you can pour down the spark plugs usually and lube up the cylinder walls and kind of you let it sit for a while and
get something to release.
Yeah, just don't go up and start hammering away at the crank pulley. You could break something.
Or just hook a fucking battery up to it and just crank the starter.
Yeah, or that.
I mean, you gotta, you don't want to be bending rods and shit like that. You don't want to be bending push rods or whatever it is.
Or if you go put a hook a battery to it and you don't know what the electrical system's like, you start some fires.
Oh hell yeah, shit yeah.
But if you hook a battery up to it and you don't want to just go cranking on the starter right away, because that the starter's old too, so it could get stuck on and you're trying to, and you could really do some damage that way too. So just pay attention to everything before you start hammering away at it.
Yeah, going back to if you can buy shit out of a book, that's. If you don't know what you're doing, the best thing to do is to find something that's going to be able to be purchased out of a book.
Yeah, buy something common and something that...
I mean, your Camaro, like Randy said, Camaro, Mustang, square body Chevy pickup truck.
Yeah, square body Chevys.
I mean, Ford's kind of a little iffy when it comes to shit like that.
Dodges you can buy a lot of stuff for.
Yeah. But a Chevy, okay, like Chevy pickups and shit, you can get drop spindles in the whole 9 yards. You can do quite a bit with not very much knowledge, skill set.
When you're talking about suspension, though, as long as you're doing it safely.
Right.
Throwing it out there.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're just talking about drop spindles, maybe C-notching and flipping the rear axle.
Yeah, well, I know when you say spindles, I mean, when you take a spindle off, you have to relieve the pressure of the spring usually, so.
Oh, yeah, okay. All right, I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want springs flying in your face.
Do your research on that one. But as far as it goes, I mean, those are easier.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I know some people that have done it that, that's what they do. They flip that shit. Somehow miraculously, they do the stuff and then they flip it and sell it to somebody that doesn't do their research properly. And they drive down the road and it bangs off of everything that they fucking hit.
You mean like what I drive?
No, I wasn't talking about you, but I am now, yeah. But yeah, you can, so even the Tri-5s. So the Tri-5s, I know they're pricier than hell, but you can literally buy that whole thing out of a catalog.
Well, you don't necessarily have to buy a 2-door either. If you're finding a 55 Chevy, I mean, you could find a 4-door.
Settle down.
I'm just saying if you're trying to do it on the cheap side, you can find a
fucking A.
You can find a 210 Chevy 210, not a 55 Bel Air.
Oh yeah. Because everybody, 4 doors are the shit.
Well, you can find 210s that are 2-door.
Right. All right, so we're not talking about 4 doors, Randy.
Well, for the people, I'm just saying, for the people who don't care about 2 doors,
right?
I mean, I get what you're saying, but 4 doors are not that desirable. I understand that, and people listening probably understand that as well. But I'm just saying, if somebody's looking on a budget and as a first kind of project, they're out there available for on the cheaper side.
Yeah,
and those type of cars, like a 55 Chevy or a 57 Chevy or 56 Chevy, you can easily find parts that are available. And you do like DD Speed Shop and cut down a bunch of 4 doors and do 2 doors.
Interesting. I always thought it would be neat to suicide 4 doors.
That would be cool.
I would make them worth buying.
Yeah.
I think a Chevy would be cool to do a 4-door to turn it into a suicide doors. I actually talked to my wife about that. I said we should just buy a bunch of fucking 4 doors and turn them all into suicides.
Well, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. The one thing about 4 doors, if they're suicide doors, I think that's the best look at a car show. Like both doors wide open, both sets, right. And you can just see through the whole car.
Mm-hmm. You get rid of the middle posts. You got to do it in a way that both doors shut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's pretty neat. Anyways, the final topic we wanted to get into here tonight, today, this morning, whenever you're listening, we told you about get your fucking ego out of the way. We told you about what to kind of look for, and then we went off topic 8 million times as far as what to look for.
Squirrel.
But the third thing we want to be looking at here is finishing it up, actually working on this project and getting to a completion here. And we want to give you a couple of tips, just the tips. And what you really want to do before you start is make sure you have enough room for this project. I can't stress that enough. If you're going to take the body off at any point in time, or even if you're just going to take the bed off of the cab, like figure out, do you have anywhere to put this shit?
Because you got to think about what your timeline is looking like.
Yeah.
How soon do you want this done? Because if you're taking beds off or cabs off or bodies off, it's going to be sitting there a while. So how long are you willing to let that sit there for a while before it goes back on?
Yeah, I mean, are you going to be able to tear all the windows out? Are you going to tear the glass out? You're going to have room to put glass somewhere because that needs to go somewhere. And if it's these older ones, they're slightly arched. So if you break it, you got to drop $500-600 on a new window, front windshield glass, back windshield glass. Same thing with the side windows. What kind of vehicle is it? If there is no glass in it, you can't just call down to the glass guy and get it cut because it's arched.
Not unless it's flat glass, but most cars from the 50s and 60s and even into the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
the windshield's usually curved.
Yeah. Well, even the side glass. I mean, was that a 70 Charger? That glass was.
Yep, that's curved.
Yeah, it was curved glass.
Most of the time, the glass in the side glass in the early cars are going to be flat, but as you get on later, they start getting curved. But most of the time, early the glasses are going to be, well, like early in the teens, 20s, 30s, mostly going to be flat for the most part.
Yeah.
Even in
I'd
the
say
40s.
even in the 40s. And,
Even in the 40s, yeah.
Yeah, touching the 50s.
But in the 50s and the 60s, they really get curved and they get expensive.
Yeah, because I know prior experience. There's a shitload of glass that you don't want to fucking replace. But anyways, that goes back to just being able to store shit. You got to think about, if you take a door off, where are you going to put the door? If you're going to take all the window mechanisms off, where are you going to put that shit?
And when you take a hood off,
Bumpers, hood. Yeah, hell yeah.
when you take a hood off, you have to make sure that, depending on the model of the car, you have to make sure that hood isn't going to sit in a way that's going to warp it, if it's going to be sitting for a while.
Right. That's with any panel, really.
Well, yeah, you're right.
Any panel, really.
Any panel.
You got to think about this shit. You can't just sit it over in the corner and call it a day, which a lot of people will. Same thing with everybody, you can be gung-ho about putting an engine together and all that shit and rebuilding it, but yet you've rebuilt the engine and all that stuff, but yet you look over and the fucking car's still sitting there. Hasn't even been touched. So then that's just sitting there. All that, all the work and effort you put into that engine, it's just going to sit there now. And you got to make sure there's not going to get moisture and anything else. There's not going to get
Dust.
Rats living in the son of a bitch and shitting down in the fucking cylinders and all that stuff. All that grease and oil and everything eventually is just going to drain to the bottom. Even with them tight tolerances, it's going to make its way south. These are things to think about as far as room goes, and we can't stress it enough to reach out for guidance and reach out for assistance and help whenever you get into a situation where you're not sure what's happening. Well, because
and find a helping hand when you need it, because don't be trying to put no truck bed on your truck when it's just yourself and you're trying to manhandle this thing on. You're gonna have a hernia.
Yeah. That's the last thing anybody wants, especially if it's inguinal. Those look exciting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you get stuck, like we've been talking about through the whole podcast, if you get stuck, man, just fucking ask. Shit, call us up. One of us will talk to you. If you don't know where to find our fucking number, just go to our website. If you don't know where to find our website, just go to any of our social media outlets. That'll just force you to go do it and raise our analytics. So there you have it.
Here's a little tip: when you're taking your car apart, bag all the bolts and label everything. Bag and label everything. Take pictures as you go. I mean, most everybody has a smartphone nowadays. You can take as many pictures as you want, as long as you have the space on your phone. But take pictures as you go, because you'll know that'll give you a direct line to how it went back. How it goes back together.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing. Like when we get a vehicle in the shop, the very first thing we do is tag and bag, pretty much.
Yeah, we take pictures of everything.
We take pictures of everything, and if it shows up and there's parts in it, we will unload them parts, and we will scatter them about so we know exactly what we have, and we will take pictures of every single part that shows up, document it, and the whole 9 yards.
However you decide to do it, just make sure you catalog.
Yeah, and that goes back to storage. You're going to be able to put this shit somewhere,
Your mom's basement.
Yeah, your mom's basement. So as far as getting guidance for everything, use your resources. If you can't find somebody that you feel is going to be that resource, there's Google and YouTube and plenty of builders out there and companies out there that are going to be willing to work with you and willing to give you direction, or hell, if you have to, like I.B.F.HotRods, find a shop that's similar to ours, where they will actually come out to your place and you can pay them to get past a headache. Because a lot of guys, I couldn't tell you how many vehicles I've ever seen sitting in the side of somebody's garage or out in a barn. And the reason is because they don't want to take it to a shop. They don't want to pay the money to take it to a shop. They don't want to pay somebody to work on it. And that's probably the biggest mistake you could ever do when it comes to building a hot rod or any sort of vehicle restoration, because these vehicles deserve to be driven. And the quality of life will go up in your world whenever you get this thing finished. And it's just to benefit everything. It's all about the build, man. Every part of it. It's all about the build. Not only is it about the car being built, the truck being built, the fucking restoration getting done. When it's finalized, the best part about the entire fucking build is when you're driving.
And it's going to be difficult to get there.
Yeah.
You're frustrated and you want to give up and you just want to sell the thing and move on with your life, but it's going to be better for you to stick it through and see it till the end.
Oh, the sense of accomplishment you're going to grab. You know, when you tell somebody you built that fucking thing, it's going to change the world.
I mean, I'd take that over failure any day.
Oh, yeah. The only way it's a failure is when you quit. It's the only way you fail. So if you never quit, you've never failed. And if you never quit building a fucking hot rod, guess what? You're going to finish the damn thing. That's all there is to it on that. And that's just keep the fucking grind, man. Keep doing it. You know, even if I get stuck on shit all the time and I'll just move on to something else.
Yeah, come back to another time.
Yeah.
An hour later, 5 minutes later, whatever it takes.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, whatever it takes.
There's plenty of shit to do on a truck or a car or anything. There's plenty of shit to do. You can move on to something else. And if the store's not open, you can move on to something else. If you can't get your question answered, you can move on to something else. There's always somebody that you can find to help you out, or there's always an article, or there's always a video, or there's always an owner's manual. Even with a rare vehicle, you can at least find some sort of manual out there that has a vehicle that's built the same year, the whole 9 yards, that has some similarities to it. And you'll find what you're looking for. It might take a hot minute, but you're going to find what you're looking for. So just keep at it, and best of luck with your first purchase, your first build, your first throwdown, and your first burnout.
Hell yeah. And try not to half-ass it too much.
Yeah.
Go full in. Figure out how to do it the right way.
And do it the fucking right way.
Do it the right way. Use the right tools to do it the right way.
I mean, if you're going to do it, just do it. If you're trying to get to a car show one Saturday and it ain't working out or whatever, don't just jerry-rig it to hell together. Take that extra 5 minutes, because that extra 5 minutes that we've talked about in the past, that's going to get you the looks. That's going to get you the awards.
There are other car shows.
Yeah.
You don't have to make that one that weekend.
That's going to get you the notoriety, man. If you put this car together properly, it's going to be it's going to be everything. It's going to be all that in a bag of chips. On that note, I guess as always, cheers to you guys out there in the I.B.F.HotRods world and the It's All About the Build podcast world. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, cheers. Here's to you. Over and out.
Thanks for listening to this episode of It's All About the Build podcast. Please comment and let us know your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel to follow along, and if you haven't already, check out our Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok to keep up with what we have going on every week. Thank you all for listening.